All right. Hello, everybody. I'm here with my friend Shelagh Howell. Are you still a Howell or did you?
No, I'm still a Howell. Yeah.
Still a Howell. My friend Shelagh Howell. Yeah. We just determined that we have known each other, been friends for like pushing 20 years,
almost,
right?
Yeah. We're just shy of 20 years.
Just shy of 20 years. So we kind of met in our like very young, I say party girl phase. Maybe we weren't party girls, but we've had
maybe we were.
had some transitions. So, but Shelagh, I thought it was really exciting because following your kind of your journey on social media, you took on homesteading. Like when I knew Shelagh, when I moved away, she was working in oil and gas, very like in an office. She always had the best outfits. Yeah, and you introduced me to like all sorts of like crazy Indian food. For me, that was crazy at the time. And so it was really cool to watch your journey into homesteading. And
well, thank you.
Yeah, and I was just why don't you give everybody who's listening a little brief rundown of like how you got into it and why you got into it?
All right. Well, I would say that, 20 years ago when we were both living up north in the cold north, I was definitely not focused on my health or where my food came from or anything like that. But I feel like it was one of those things that naturally happens with so many people where they watch this documentary and that documentary and pick up that book and read that other book. And then slowly, you're asking yourself questions like, well, why are so many people sick? And like, I don't want to get sick. So how can I don't know, not eat a can of Scooby-Doo's for dinner, which is like zoodles, but like Scooby-Doo characters. And instead, think about like what is in the food that I'm eating, and how far did my food travel? And I kind of became a bit of an obsession. And so, so really, I started eating organically. And then, I put in my time up north. I did 13 years. And, meanwhile, I'd sort of really been focused on it. And my Netflix really reflected, because, at that point, Netflix existed. My Netflix reflected like my values. And I met my partner, Cam, and he had grown up on a farm. He wasn't like a farmer, but he had spent some time on a farm. They had animals. And then he also was like just super into the whole off the grid life. Now we're not off the grid, but that is definitely a dream and something we want. But in the meantime, we're like, let's just, let's go for it. So after I found out I was pregnant, we did some house hunting and we bought a house in the country. And before the baby was due, 1 month before my first son was due, we packed up our home and we moved down to the BC interior on 85 acres. Sorry, that's my cat. And now we just basically, that was kind of the journey. And now like I'm obsessed with gardening. So I have a goal to grow, I want to say like all of our food, but I'm not growing wheat and I'm not going to grow coffee and tea and olive oil.
Like, can you even grow coffee in Canada?
No. And I did research some tea trees that would possibly grow in my area, but it just seems like such a struggle that we're going to bend the rules in some places for sure. Yeah.
I was also like, is it possible in Canada to be completely off the grid and
totally self-sufficient?
Totally self-sufficient and quote unquote normalish. So I grew up in where I grew up as a kid. It was like an hour north of town, in the boonies, and there were some people out there that were not quite off the grid, but just about off the grid and a little eccentric, right?
Yeah.
So when you're like completely off the grid, I'm instantly going to those hermits who live up in the bush. Not that
I
you could ever
know.
be a
So
hermit, but
no, I'm definitely too social to be a hermit, but no, I totally hear you. One of the things with when we were house hunting and buying our house, like, yes, we have 85 acres, but my house is right on the street and I can see my neighbor's house from my front window. And I really like that. Because I am originally from the city, like a really busy city. And so I like that I could know that somebody else was out there and, we have all our neighbors on the street. Now I've been here for 5 years and definitely part of me is like, we could have our house a little bit more isolated, a little bit further back. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. We're a little counterculture. Granted, in our little community, you would not believe the gardens. Like people have the most amazing gardens and you drive down the highway or in a little streets and stuff. And it's just, I want to pull over and be like, hi, can I have a garden tour? Because a lot of people out here. Yeah. Oh, you can grow that? Amazing.
so is it like a big farmers market scene, or are the people in your area kind of growing it just to sustain themselves?
I would say a bit of both. There is a very lovely farmers market that we have with some really awesome growers, but I would say I wouldn't say there's like a million vegetable farmers or growers at the farmers market. A lot of it is just like people that are just into it. There's a Facebook group with a bunch of the North Thompson gardeners. And it's really neat just to see, we talk about what seeds we've saved and what did well this year. And so, so people are just really into it for their own personal benefit.
So Shelagh has a YouTube channel, and you just did one. I saw your thing, your like stash of seeds. And then I watch your Instagram stories like on the regular, and watching you go through your seeds and milk the cow and like the chickens. I'm like looking forward to like the tour of the chickens. I remember when you had the ducks and there was like a sick duckling, and I was like, this is the best. Like to just follow along. And it actually, I want to say I'm kind of a thrifter. I like to like scavenge my decorations, like especially Christmas decorations. I'm like tree clippings. Oh, there's a broken branch on the side of the road that's going to be perfect. Pull over. And the people around me think it's a little bit weird, but I've seen you kind of repurposing and thrifting some of your stuff. And I was like, yes, Shelagh is my person.
Oh my God.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm currently sitting at my dining table and I have cedar boughs as like partial decoration with pumpkins on them as my centerpiece.
I love it.
Yeah.
So were you always like a thrifty, like were you always this person?
Oh my God, Andy. No, I was probably the complete opposite of this. And that's what's really funny because, when I did have an administrative job in the oil and gas industry, I can't even tell you what I spent on my clothes. Like it was sickening the amount of money that I spent on my clothes. I mean, granted, I was incredibly young and I just had to pay rent and, so everything else went to like $200 jeans and $300 shoes. Oh, sorry, that's my cat. That just, so no, I wasn't always like this. And I just think if I'd saved all that money that I spent on shoes, can you imagine? But it's crazy how in our lives, like just how much we change. Like you're in that moment and you just think like, that's how I am. But we really just change with time, with influences, different people that you meet or books that you read or podcasts that you listen to. Like it really can expand your mind and who you are. And it's also really nice if you can find a partner that is, I don't know, is changing too, or at least is like into what you're into and supportive. But
go ahead.
I was gonna say I did get rid of those shoes finally though.
I think you like posted that on a social media, like a story or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, guys, I'm the shoulder pads and stylish shoulder pads, like really cute blazers from Zara. They're gone. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no place for those on the farm.
No, now like if you wear anything nice, the goal is to, like, say I'm, going to play group and I'm like, okay, my clothes are clean. I just have to make it from the house to the car and like, don't get chicken poop on it. Don't go and pet the cow. Like, stay clean. But really, I mean, it's not really an obsession, but yeah, I mean, when you're out here, there's just mud and muck everywhere.
Yeah. Do you think was there like one specific documentary or something that was pivotal for you that kind of turned you into more of this lifestyle?
I'm trying to think. There was one, like I was sort of getting into it, like, from here and there, like eating organically. I do remember there was some books, but there was some documentary and it was on Netflix. It was the one that basically makes everybody go vegan. I'm just trying to think of the name. Anyway, and in it, this woman talks about how intelligent pigs are and cows are and how animals are raised in these cages and the life of them. And I was like, that's it. I'm going vegan. So I did. I was a vegan for 6 months. I'll have to tell you what I'll send you the note on whatever that documentary was. And I was like, yeah, like a really strict vegan. I lived in Grand Prairie, Alberta. So I started going to the farmer's market in Grand Prairie and I was like going up to the sellers and the farmers. And I'm like, so can you tell me about your chickens? Like, are they happy chickens? And this one woman, Elizabeth, I remember her, and she was like, yes, they're very happy. They're free range. We give them oyster shells to eat and organic feed. And my brother sings them opera songs. And I'm like, okay, I'm buying your eggs. And oh yeah, that wasn't vegan. That was okay. So I was vegan. Sorry, just recounting the facts. I was vegan. And then when slowly I was like, okay, I'm only going to eat happy eggs. And then bit by bit, I was like, I'm actually really hungry. I want to eat more than happy eggs. I'm going to eat happy, chickens and happy beef. And like, essentially that's kind of where that journey went because I was starving. I was a terrible vegan. I
personally myself, I would not make it as a vegan, but I grew up on a farm on a ranch. We specifically had beef cattle, but we had pigs and chickens and like had a horse. Like,
did you?
Yeah. So we had like a 500 head beef ranch, like beef cattle ranch. We always had pigs that we would eat, and we had chickens for a while there. We had a lot of chickens. Yep. And like I got my first horse when I was 3, but we used the horses for like working, right? So like,
wow.
I would go out and check the cows in the summer before I went to school. Anyway, so
talk about the work ethic.
Yeah, shoveled a lot of shit in my life. Lot of shit. And I didn't have a choice. Like it was like you earn your keep. You're on the farm. Anyways, that's a whole nother story. But we always had the philosophy of, so we weren't necessarily certified organic or anything, but they were pasture raised. And if a cow or an animal is stressed, they don't gain as much weight, right? They don't. So we always had the philosophy of like, when we moved them from pasture to pasture, like they didn't run, we did it stress-free. Like we were very like pretty good to our animals. And so it like never occurred to me that like I saw feedlots, but I only saw them as like finishing feedlots, right?
Yeah.
They weren't that bad. So I wasn't really exposed to this like horrific mass food farming.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like the horrific shit that they do to animals. And you're like, oh my God. So as I got older, like I always understood where food came from. we always butchered, like we always had one calf that maybe its mom died or its ears got frozen off or something, because it was really cold, right, in Fort St. John.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the spring, like when you be in calving season, sometimes ears and tails got frozen off, right? So we always had like one kind of wonky one that we'd keep and butcher for ourselves, right? So we were essentially eating your pet, but
Yes.
it made you like really appreciate them that much more, right? And so it was like a way of life, and but it was really good because there was so much that I learned as far as like about food, but also about anatomy.
Yeah.
And I feel like the anatomy actually like brought me to where I am in my current job, right? But anyways, I digress. Hunting, like my dad had a little trap line, which now I'm like, ooh, little trap line wasn't so great, but he supposedly used humane traps. You know, the coyotes, they were you know, would eat the calves if the calves were being born. Like the coyotes would like eat the calves right out of the mothers.
Right.
Yeah, right? Like, so anyway, I digress. I grew up on the farm, and so watching you do yours, I'm like, I love it because it kind of takes me back, and it's just so surprising to me that somebody would want to go do this. Like growing up in it, I'm like, that was some hard shit. And so the fact that you're like, I just got a milk cow, I'm like, what? Sheila just got a milk cow, everybody.
I forgot. I knew that you grew up on a farm, but yeah, it's so funny. Like, so I've had the cow, I've only had her 9 days, and it's a bit of a funny story because, so, I mean, everybody knows we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I really am trying to grow. Like I wanted to grow last year. I did a food sustainability challenge. No. 2 years ago, I did a food sustainability challenge where I was just going to eat it was literally like a 5-mile diet. And so then this time I was like, okay, I want to do it, but I want to do it better. Like I'm ready. My son, I just had my second son. He's 8 months old. And I'm like, I am ready to tackle this. I've got energy. I've got support. I want to put everything into it. And, we got a livestock guard dog because we were losing chickens, like my beautiful heritage breed, gonna lay all the different colors of eggs, happy hens that I like had doted on as chicks. We were just losing them left, right, and center. And I'm like, okay, we need to stock our dog. And we had planned on getting sheep. I had raised orphan lambs, which are like basically bottle lambs where either the mom rejects them, like they have triplets or something, you know what that is, but just in case other people don't know. Anyway, so I had raised lambs before, but we're like, no, we're going to get a flock of sheep and they're going to be friends with and like live with my livestock guard dog, because livestock guard dogs are 100% outside. So they need company, right? And they obviously bond well with sheep. They look like sheep. So I get this dog, I've got my sheep lined up, and it's the heritage breed Shetland sheep. They're super hardy. They birth unassisted really well. And I'm like, this is perfect for me because I'm like a bit of a novice in the livestock department. And that falls through because we needed to pick them up on a certain day. And my husband was working on this crazy contract. He was so busy and he couldn't go that day. And she's like, somebody else wants them. And I'm like, okay, go buy sheep. And I was just so sad. So then I'm like, okay, well, what can I get? And I'm looking at like sheep on Kijiji and everywhere, every like Facebook chat group, even though I don't think they're supposed to sell animals, but everybody does their thing. So I'm just like, okay, let's get goats. My dog as a puppy grew up with goats. I'm like, let's get goats. And I'm like, but if we're going to have goats, let's get dairy goats. So at least they kind of like have a purpose, right? I don't really want to eat goat. They're so cute. So I just can't. So I'm like, okay. And my husband's like, no, if we're getting goats, let's just get a cow. And I'm like, no, the cow is in our 5-year plan. We can't get a cow. He's like, just get a cow. So I'm like, just browsing on Kijiji. And then I'm like, just talking to somebody. And then I'm like, oh my God, we just got a cow. So I've had a cow for 9 days.
You totally manifested a cow.
I I manifested that cow. That cow just happened. And so I have the cow, and now I'm like, I mean, there are some people that I follow on YouTube and on Instagram that like, I just watch their like daily cow milking videos and like care and maintenance and all the cheese that they make and all the things. So it definitely makes you feel like that's something that you can do when you see somebody else do it. I think you had a name for that kind of person.
Expander. Those people
An
are expander.
Yes. So there's this channel on Instagram and on YouTube. She has the same name. It's Venison for Dinner. Her name is Kate, and she lives in British Columbia. And she's like, I think she's outside of Williams Lake. I don't really know, but she's further north and like somewhere very cold. And she has these dairy cows. And she basically shows you that like, as a normal human being, you can just have a cow and it's okay. So that was sort of something where I was like, I could do this. So, you know, I'm still binge watching all her cow footage just to like get caught up on like some details here and there. But yeah, we have a cow.
So Sheila doesn't binge watch Netflix. She just binge watches milk cow videos.
Yeah. And it's funny. We have like my friends and I during COVID, we started like a WhatsApp group chat. And I'm like, guys, what's on like your YouTube history, like, or your watch later list? And they're like, yeah, so we don't watch YouTube. We just watch Netflix. And I'm like, oh, so not everybody is on YouTube all the time.
I am on YouTube pretty frequently for astrology and like recipes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no milk cow videos for me, but I love that you were looking at milk cow recipes.
Well, thank you. I'm going to be calling you when I have questions like, Andy, my cow is doing this. Is this normal?
Oh no, it's been a long time. I have not been on the farm for a long time. But yeah, as a kid though, I think it's awesome for your kids because as a kid growing up, like you learn so much. Like your kids are going to see your milk cow give birth, probably, right? Like,
oh yeah, yeah. I hope, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and another big thing that I really like is that like my son, like right now he's 5, and he really is learning about where food comes from in terms of like we make like besides like grinding our own wheat, which I have done, but we buy our wheat organically, but like where we make everything from scratch. Like we don't buy salad dressing, you know, I make ketchup. He does prefer store-bought ketchup, but you know, like we make a lot of our food from scratch. And so he really gets an idea of where food comes from, where, you know, I like was talking to my sister, it was her first year planting a garden this year. And she's like, well, how do I plant potatoes? And I'm like, well, you just like stick them in the ground. And then when they start to grow, you just hill them. And she's like, stop. What do you mean hill? Like, what is hilling a potato? And like, you just forget, like, I wanted to laugh, of course, but not everybody knows what that means or what that looks like. Right. So yeah, so he's gaining a lot of knowledge. And he learns a lot, like from looking at, we go on hikes and he's looking at animal tracks from like what animals are around, and learning all the flora, you know, the native trees and plants and stuff. So yeah, it's really neat. He's lucky, I think.
Totally lucky.
Yeah.
I've been having this, talking about your kids and food. I've been having this discussion with a lot of my clients lately is their children won't eat leftovers.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, what? So although I grew up with like really clean meat and we had a lot of meat, I grew up drinking like a can of Coke for breakfast and having like a bowl of Captain Crunch with my can of Coke for breakfast. And I took like Mr. Noodles for lunch. Like, so we didn't have the healthiest diet, although like I had an understanding of where meat came from and like what good meat was. And, you know, we had deer and sometimes moose and whatever. But so now my clients, they're talking about their kids and how they just won't eat leftovers. And the one client, she's like, I just threw away a whole garbage bag full of food from my fridge. I just cleaned up my fridge and threw it away. And I was like, oh, so.
Oh my God.
I was like, so you can just cook less food, you know? Like, we talk about fasting all the time. Like, you fast on a regular basis. You just buy less groceries. You just cook less. Like, what? Your husband hunts. Like, they always have a freezer full of wild game and like really good stuff. It's awesome because she gives me all their wild bones because she doesn't make bone broth.
Oh
So
my God, that's so cool.
I know, right? Anyways, so she threw this bag of groceries, and then we had this conversation. There was a couple other ladies there, and their kids just won't eat leftovers. So she specifically had, I was like, oh, well, just cook less. Like, this seems to be something that all of you guys need to talk about because all of your families won't eat leftovers. I was like, well, just cook less. And she's like, well, we cooked one steak per person in the family. And then we had our sides, and the kids were just full. Maybe the steaks were too big or whatever. And so we have a full steak and 2 like partial steaks left over. I'm like, your kids won't eat leftover steak?
Oh my God. Wow.
And although her husband hunts and the oldest boy hunts, the other 2 kids don't. And I wonder if the kids knew where it came from, like what the sacrifice was, and like, because you appreciate it more. And especially when you're putting work into making your food, I'm also like, make your freaking teenagers cook. Like, make them cook or get them participate. I don't know. But I've been having this conversation on the regular with people about their kids will not eat leftovers, or they only want to take bear paws. And I'm like, why do you have bear paws in the house? Like, why are you even buying that shit?
Yeah. Like when people say like my kid will only eat this, I'm like, then I don't buy it. Yeah. No, it's funny. There is like a crazy connection that is lost between like where food comes from and the food that we eat, and like that appreciation. Like, I mean, I'm sure that like 99.9% of people don't even know about feedlots, and they don't know like, where did that steak in the grocery store come from? And do they even care if it was grass fed, or like the life that it had, the death that it had, anything like that? Like, it is really crazy. And I mean, I of course have like dreams and opinions on the topic, but I just think it would be really amazing if there were lots of little local farms around cities, and maybe cities might need to be a little bit smaller so that there's more access to that. Because obviously when you have like a million people living in a city, you like, how do you feed those people? Like, not everybody can go to the farmer's market, and like those little farms can't support it. But I mean, like where we live, there's a city of 4,000, which is our closest city. And in terms, I mean, of course, it's all farms around here. But I mean, it's people raising, like we just got a full cow, like a butchered beef, up the highway. And it was just grass-fed beef and from a local farmer. And I'm like, oh my God. And we got it for under $5 a pound. Not that that's super relevant, but it's just like, we're just so lucky because we live in a small community and that's available to us. And then we know where that cow came from. We know where it was butchered, which is another thing. Yeah. And we got to like pick the cuts too. Anyway, so then you really have an idea. Like, I know the guy that they call it harvested, but essentially the person that killed the cow. Like, I know that guy. I know his values. I know how much he cares about animals. So definitely, like, we're having a tomahawk steak for dinner tomorrow. 1 steak between 4 people. I mean, one of them is only 8 months old, but he eats beef. And I can tell you, we are not wasting any of that steak. And my son, he knows all of it, and he knows where it came from. And we're also now, our pregnant Jersey cow was bred to Black Angus. And so people hate to hear this, but we are going to be eating the offspring when it's of age.
But why?
I know people hate to hear it.
Well, yeah, you don't want to kill the baby, but like, we need to eat.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I know it's a really crazy idea. I'm going to raise animals to eat them. Yeah. They're not going to be pets.
But you're going to give it like a
Oh God.
happy life, right? Like
Yeah.
a good
It's going to be
quality of
treated
life.
almost like a member of the family, which I mean, that whole cycle is super crazy. Like you give them the best life and you give them all the love, and then they just have one bad day.
But
You know,
it's over quick.
it is. And I mean, you do it in the most humane way, of course. And we do it because we're just eating the meat. That animal doesn't have to travel. It doesn't have to be stressed. You know, it doesn't even have to get into a trailer to go anywhere. So like in terms of like happiness of that animal, and also it's accepting that we're human beings and I am going to eat meat for my health and my body and, you know, what I choose. And so in order for that to happen, I would much rather be sad that, you know, like after the animal dies, like I would like to be sad. I would like to mourn it. And same, like we've raised, as I said, we raised orphan lambs before. And like, I definitely cried when we harvested them. But I mean, then when you're eating it and you're enjoying them, you're like, I'm going to eat meat. And so that I know that these lambs had the best life. And yeah.
And when you're preparing it for supper, like you put a little more love into it.
Yeah.
At least I found that, right? I don't know.
Oh,
Not that you should treat any meat like less or more, but you're like, oh, like you know the sacrifice behind it and you put the love into it because you know how much love was put into it. You know that, yeah, I don't know. Just like,
yeah, no. Yeah. And I think like that's the biggest thing, like understanding where your food came from, like whether it's a local farm or your own backyard, you really do appreciate it. And I mean, not that, you know, we all want to become foodies, but then you're like, okay, well, how do I want to cook this? Like, how do I really want to get the best flavor from this meat and really appreciate everything about it? We actually, like when we first moved down here, met some really great friends, and they were raising these chickens. They're called poulet de Bresse, but they call them poulet de Bresse Canadienne. And basically it is like the most beautiful bird. So they're these organically raised. So organic feed is incredibly expensive. So organically raised, free range on this amazing acreage. And the chickens are just in with these gorgeous livestock guard dogs, living the best life. And then, you know, they were very conscious of the butchering process to ensure that the animals weren't stressed. And anyway, and they really educated us on ensuring like the whole process, like how it's, don't just feed your animals grains, like make sure that they're eating, you know, grasses and organic feed. Like chickens, of course, they do eat grains, but I was referring to like other animals because then they also got into Icelandic sheep, and we're raising these beautiful Icelandic sheep, and they were just really invested in like, okay, we've got this gorgeous animal, let's feed it the best we can. And then that also feeds us, and how that cycle works. And so that was a really great friendship. They recently moved to the island, which we're super bummed about, but we got a full education just from everything that they were doing on their property.
And are you eating nose to tail? Like, are you guys eating organ meats?
We get the organ meats. Okay, so when we raised the lambs, we got the organ meats. But when we got this cow recently, we didn't. But yes, I tried. So we got the kidneys and I was like, okay, I'm going to make kidneys. So I like Google, like, what's the best kidney recipe? And I'll tell you that that's a tough one. Like I tried really hard to make them taste delicious and they were not good. We're not getting everything. We're not getting the oink, you know how people say that, but I make bone broth. And I mean, you're keto and you do that. So you probably, have done this, but roasting bones and eating the marrow.
So good. Oh my God.
I
need to have bread with it though. Like I need to have bread. I can't just do the marrow because it's so good, right? Like, oh yeah.
It is. That is a crazy food. You know, one thing that I just find really insane is like all the foods. This is more along the lines of like fermented foods, but like all the things about food that we don't know that you can eat. Like the fact that like when you get animals or like you're shopping at the grocery store, like everybody should be able to buy bones. Like for how easy it is to make bone broth or like roast the bones and eat the marrow, like everybody should be getting bones. But that's something where you like have to ask your butcher, you know, it's a specialty thing that they set them aside for you. Like, isn't that just so crazy?
So hot tip for those who are listening, wild bones or organic bones are like, those are what you should be using for your bone broth or your roast. And if you go kind of during hunting season to a butcher and you ask if they have wild bones in Canada, they can't sell them to you because they're wild, but they can give them to you for your dogs in quotes. But they've just butchered the elk or the moose or whatever came in, and they're gonna give them to their dogs or whatever they do with them. So they'll just give you a box of wild bones, and they'll even like,
which is like, that's gold.
So I'll go to the butcher and ask for wild bones, and then my friend brings me wild bones, and then I like smoke them and roast them, and then I freeze them for more bone broth. But
yes.
Because there's a lot. She'll be like, here's a garbage bag full of like deer bones. And I'm like, thank you. She's like, this is so disgusting. What's wrong with you? I'm like, no, it's so good. It's so good. What's wrong with you?
Oh my God. Yeah. You know, I feel like that's one thing that I'm hoping like culturally changes over say the next 20 years or 50 years is that it becomes more commonplace for people to, you know, eat the bones, like make the bone broth, but also like ferment as a means for like preserving food, like eating fermented foods. Like right now I'm drinking my kefir water with ginger in it. And like, that is like the easiest thing to make. And like, nobody makes it.
But we're also, so give me your thoughts on this. We're also told that it needs pasteurization. Like fermenting on your own is dangerous. You could kill yourself or make yourself very sick. Help us out with that, because I have not fermented. Well, it's something I just haven't tackled because I'm like, I can buy some really delicious kimchi that's made locally. But
no, I know. And you know, it does feel like such a scary thing. But once you sort of like basically read the first page of any like fermentation book, it just says like you can't kill yourself. And I'm totally generalizing, but so like, like, okay, so this is crazy, but I made fermented hot sauce. And when you ferment something, like all you're doing is you're adding salt as like a form of like preservation. So you make a brine. So your brine is water and salt, and then you add your vegetable. It's really like the principle of all of fermenting. But anyway, that's the generalization, but not really entirely. So I make this hot sauce. I grew the peppers in my garden, picked them off. I took out the seeds because I knew I didn't want it to be too hot. Sorry, my dog is crying. I didn't want it to be too hot. So then I fermented them, cut them up, put them in, fermented them, and I left them on the counter. And this is when I like had a baby, and he was like so little. And so I let that hot sauce sit on the counter in that brine, like the peppers sit in the brine for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I'm like, okay, it's time to throw out this hot sauce, or soon to be hot sauce. So because I'm like, it just can't be good, right? Like this is going to be absolutely disgusting. I mean, how long was it? It was probably 6 weeks. And usually when you ferment something, I don't know, like, I think like 3 weeks max, maybe. Like people do 3 days. Anyway, so I open the lid and I'm like, oh my God, it smells amazing. And the rule of thumb with fermenting is if it smells bad, don't eat it. But if it smells good, it's good. And so I stuck it in a blender. I whizzed it up and I tried it. And it was like magic. It was like hypercolor red, like the most vibrant red hot sauce you've ever seen. And I just tasted so good. And it was literally water, salt, and these hot peppers. Like, and I'm like, oh my God. So that really kind of, this like just recently happened. Like I've been making sauerkraut every year, but that really kind of like blew my mind. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be fermenting basically everything. And then I'm starting to read The Art of Fermentation. And not to go on like a huge tangent, but I had my appendix out in the fall. And it was a bit of, it was a bit, what's the word, like far gone. So I had to take crazy antibiotics after and have like an extended stay in the hospital because, you know, they wanted to make sure that I didn't get infection. And so basically my flora was toast and I was still nursing. And you pass your flora through your breast milk to your baby and you're building their gut flora. So I was worried about myself and digestive issues, which I don't have, but I used to have. And I was worried about, you know, my son. And they had said that the antibiotics were safe for my baby, but I'm like, okay, let's get on
flora,
it.
So yeah, it's safe for your baby, but you're killing flora and you're essentially impacting. Oh man, this is a whole tangent. I'm not going to hijack it. I'm going to make some notes when you're done. Go ahead.
Yeah. We call it, my friends, we call it our bag. We're just a walking bag of bacteria, but nobody wants to hear that.
Totally what we are. And it influences everything, right? It influences everything. Our behavior and everything is based on our bacteria. Like, anyways.
Oh my God. We need to talk more often. Yes,
100%. I think we need to do like a whole episode just on this.
Just on fermentation. So as a goal, I've been like, okay, well, what can I ferment? So the woman at Playgroup was like, I have kefir grains, like water kefir grains. And I'm like, sign me up. I was doing kombucha before. And so I'm just like, every day I want to have something fermented on my plate, whether it's a hot sauce. And every day I'm drinking kefir water. I'm going to be doing kefir milk as soon as the cow is in milk, which will be in less than 2 weeks. And yeah. And then I was also looking up like really interesting, and this is a side tangent, but like all of the fermented things that you can make with milk. And Scandinavian culture, they do quite a bit with raw milk being fermented every day. They'll do like a 24-hour, similar to kefir. And so I'm totally going to get into that. That's going to be magical. But anyway, so after my surgery, I was like, I just need to take everything fermented that I can nonstop. And I never felt any different from the antibiotics. So, I mean, it's hard to say one way or another what happened, but I'm happy I did it. And I keep doing it because I learned that your gut flora constantly has to be fed. So whether you're taking prebiotics and probiotics, and I didn't know that. I kind of felt like, okay, well, you're born with it and that's kind of what it is. And yeah, you can feed it good food and bad food, but I didn't know that like, it's this sort of like growing and evolving thing.
And like so much impacts it. So for those of you that have children and want to know a little bit more about like gut flora in babies, read the book called Gut and Psychology Syndrome. So interesting. It's a doctor talks about how a lot of different cognitive issues could be potentially and are related to gut flora. And so many of us are born non-vaginally now. And so when we pass through the vaginal canal, you're gulping down all this really good flora. And then lots of us aren't breastfed anymore. So you're not getting good bacteria through there. And anyway, so we have so much of these different like psychological issues with children or adults, right? And a lot of it links back to the gut and psychology because the brain and the gut work together. 90% of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut lining, right? So anyways, so read Gut and Psychology Syndrome if you have children and you want to learn more about gut health and that. Anyways.
I love it.
That's
amazing.
Totally say we are like 80% bacteria. So it makes sense that what you consume impacts you.
Yeah.
Who you are, how you grow, how you live, how you think. It's all,
Well, it's so interesting because you think like, okay, I'm reading this one dairy book. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember the name of it, but she was talking about in the book how like pre-industrial revolution, like even in urban settings, so many people had dairy cows in their backyard. And it was once they sort of brought in modern plumbing and sewer systems, that people didn't want to have cows and all of their waste as a part of like that sort of urban setting. But so it was interesting to think like, okay, so like everybody was drinking raw milk and knew how to make cheeses. And I mean, not everybody, but like it was more common. And this is like before refrigeration. So like more people knew how to ferment foods for food storage and food preservation. And so it's like, what have we lost in the last 70 years, 100 years, in terms of like, yes, our gut flora, but like that knowledge, like this, now we're so afraid, like we've been scared about like raw milk until we're blue in the face. But it's like, what are we, everybody has, not everybody, but like all these autoimmune diseases, right? And like so many people being sick, it's like I feel like we've lost something, and like we're suffering the consequences because of like this lost knowledge about the food that we're consuming and how to consume it.
Yeah, like this doesn't compute to me. We're terrified of raw. We're terrified of raw cheeses, like unpasteurized cheeses, milks, that type of thing. And I realize like pregnancy is different, but I'm like, so as a pregnant person, whatever, you're terrified of raw stuff. People in general, pregnant or not, are terrified of raw stuff, but they have no problem going to McDonald's or giving their babies like all this crazy artificial food dye, or they're ingesting it when they're like potentially pregnant as well. And I'm like, so, but this is natural. Yeah. I realized there could be maybe some side effects with pregnancy or whatever, like just generally speaking, pregnant women ate that stuff for thousands of years, but
yeah.
And now that's so scary, but now we're like going with artificial stuff and not caring what's in our drinking water. And like, how do you get so far away from this?
Yeah, and it is a bit, I would say it's a bit of an obsession to sort of think like, when I find something like, whether I'm watching a YouTube, something on YouTube about some off-grid Swedish couple, and they're doing like a little tour of their house, and I see like, she's like, and this is the fermented drink we make every day from raw milk. And I'm like, what is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? Because the obsession is the lost knowledge. Like, what don't we know? Like, I really just want to go back. Not that, I mean, I love modern medicine. For example, my appendix, because that basically saved my life. Like, I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, but I just want to know what I don't know. And like, you have to either go down the YouTube wormhole or the blogosphere to like just find like, okay, like next on my list, I am going to ferment garlic and honey, which I'm super excited about. And I'm going to preserve egg yolks in salt. These are the next two things on my
Oh my God.
list.
I have watched so many videos and read like books on how to do this. And I've like seen people like slicing them and eating them. And it's been years.
Yes.
Like, oh my God. Every time I watch, I'm like, that looks so delicious. I need to do this. So you need to tell me how it goes, and you'll be my expander for this.
Oh, I will totally do it, because I have like a giant bowl of extra eggs on the counter right now. And usually we would do pickled eggs. You can actually ferment eggs, which is super cool. I've never done it. I basically, if I can like preserve something without having to put it in the fridge, I am going to do it. Or if I have to can. I do love canning. I am definitely obsessed with canning, and I love pressure canning. So I was going to say, when you were talking about bone broth, like the way that you like prepare your bones and then you put it in the freezer, I was like, oh, so are you gonna can that? Because I love canning.
Because I usually because I don't can, I've not gotten into that. It's maybe something I will in the future, but I'll typically just do a batch of bone broth as I need it. Or I'll make a big batch and then freeze some. But yeah, canning would maybe make more sense than freezing it, because I'm like, I got this, and it's in plastic. That's another thing too, right? I'm like,
I know. But when you freeze stuff, it is really hard not to freeze stuff in plastic. And believe me, I have frozen so many things in canning jars, but plastic just preserves your food so much better. And we really take the stance that it's like, if you're going to take the time to grow that food and you want to freeze it and save it and preserve it, sometimes it's just like, okay, we're going to use plastic because sometimes you just have to realize that it's for the greater good so that you can enjoy that food later.
Yeah.
That's our stance on it anyway.
And ultimately, I think as long as you're making an effort, like you're trying, you're doing your place, like you're have so much glass already, right? Like you're partially off the grid, you're like reducing waste, thrifting, all of the things, right? So it can't be perfect all the time. And I think that's also too with culture now, or like society now, is it's like, well, it's all or nothing. And this is going to be a tangent, but I also find that people seem to be really caught up with like, well, who are you? Who do you like? Where do you fit in? And if it's not exactly by like a quote unquote, you're not checking all of the boxes, you're not that person, or you're like a fraud. And I think tangent, but I think that if we could all maybe just like take a step back and just try to be better and learn and do our thing and listen to people and learn stuff and have an open mind and stop being so worried about where we fit in the what am I, who am I, where do I fit in. I feel like everybody would be happier. We could solve a few problems. Like, I don't know.
No, I definitely 100% agree with you. And I have been like one of those people where it's like, okay, I'm going to be zero waste, and I will do like the zero waste challenges or a frugal challenge. I've definitely done those where it's like, I'm not spending any money for a month, or vegan. Like I was all or nothing with vegan. And of course, when I was vegan, I was crazy judgmental about anybody that ate meat. But no, you're right. It's like, there are how many billions of people on the planet now? Over 7. I don't even know, but it's like, it's all a journey. Like who you are and what you're doing, like good for you for even thinking about it. Good for you for having the conversation. And, and I think like that sort of has brought me here too, like being hardcore vegan and being hardcore zero waste has sort of led me to like this middle ground where it's like here's a bit of a thing. I do the black woven plastic on my garden because it is amazing in terms of fighting weeds. And at first I felt so guilty and I felt so judged because it's plastic. Yes, it lasts for 20 years or so, they say, whether or not it will. But by me doing that, I can grow so much more food. And I can and preserve and store and cook and clean. Ignore the cleaning part. But like the point is like, it is worth it for me to have the plastic in my garden if it means that I can grow more food for my family or spend more time with my children. So I think that, the balance is a really important thing to come to terms with. Like, let's just all do our best and be nice about it. And the world would be better.
But you do learn huge lessons in those extremes though, right? Yeah. I teach like an intuitive eating course, and a lot of people who come to it are very like anti-diet culture. But I'm like, if you want to eat a certain way, eat a certain way. Like, you learn in those extreme parts, good or bad, right? So typically in the poor lessons or the bad lessons or the tough lessons is usually where we learn the most. And any good things that we learn from those extremes, whether it's dieting or zero waste or I don't know, whatever, you're still learning, right? And so it's that lifelong knowledge, and then you can decide whether that's what you want. Is that right for you or not? And sometimes you can't decide until you've experienced it, right? I don't know.
Yeah. It's one of those things where when you're in it, you definitely do think that it's all or nothing. And it's just moving through that you really learn about yourself, what is important to you. But you have to go through that in so many ways to come out on the other end, for sure. I was really, really obsessed with being off the grid. And I mean, obviously I want to be off the grid, but sometimes there are other things that need more of my time and energy to focus on. Like, oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes, yeah, you just kind of realize like, okay, maybe being off the grid isn't as important as let's get a dairy cow. And that's going to be something that's going to provide huge nourishment for our family and more beyond that. But so yeah, it is kind of putting things in balance, or like maybe we don't need to focus on off the grid because maybe that means that my husband spends more time at home because we don't need to make as much money, because that's expensive. That process is really expensive. Anyway, it's just kind of moving through that. And of course, it's weird what you learn as you get through life and you get older and you're like, I can find comfort in where I am now and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I recently have been like the comfort in that and the journey recently was asked like, well, what do you see for yourself? Like, where do you want to be in 5 years? What does she look like? What is she doing? Where are you? Like, what exactly to the, like in manifestation or creation, like, to the article of clothing, what are you doing? Like envision it. And I'm like, I have like a rough idea of things I would like to be doing, but I don't know what I don't know. And I'm going to learn so much from now until in 5 years. It's how can I be that precise? Like, I know if sometimes you're wanting to create it and that's what you want to create, for sure, be there. Like, I also want to be open to the journey.
Yeah.
The journey and the lessons. And you talked about it when we first got on here, was like who we were then and who we are now. Like, whoa, I would have never thought, right?
No, you could have, there was no predicting. And I mean, that's probably everybody out there.
Yeah.
I remember when I was 21 or 22, I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And that was a really big game changer book for me in so many ways that it was for so many people, just realizing like you can just like understanding your emotions, your circle of influence, like all those things, which is really wonderful. But something else that he talked about was like the most successful people are the people that plan ahead. And he talked about all these Harvard graduates. And the biggest thing he said was like having your ladder lean up against the right wall. Like, are you climbing the ladder, but it's leaning up against the wrong wall? And the wall is, of course, like your goals and where you want to be. Like, are you, because like, it's great that you're going for that promotion at work, but do you even care to be working at that job? Right. And I think that that's a really great conversation to have. And that's a really great thing to think. But sometimes you don't necessarily know where life is going to take you. Like, good for all those Harvard graduates. That's really amazing and wonderful. But like, until I worked in administration and oil and gas, I would have known that I absolutely love Excel spreadsheets. Like, I don't know why. And, but that brought me to a lot of different jobs. Or like by doing something that you actually really don't like, maybe it also, like sitting at a desk for 8 hours, points you in the direction of something that you do like, such as being in the garden for 8 hours. So sometimes you have to lean that ladder up against the wrong wall in order to kind of know what wall you want to be leaning on. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that can lead us into so many more conversations.
I know.
Yeah.
We haven't talked in so long.
I know. We need to do another 3 episodes. We need to talk about goal setting, the wrong ladder leaning, fermentation. Yeah, I also want to know all about like homesteading and children and how you fit everything in. But I mean, we're almost at an hour for this episode, so
Yeah. And I'll just tell you, it's pure chaos anyway. So
Just rolling with it.
oh yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, we're getting a cow. How are we going to do that? I don't know. Let's just do it. Okay, great. Sounds awesome.
As a kid, I remember, like, as a really small kid, I have so many memories of being very young, like 2 and 3 years old. I have memories of that young, and so many of them were spending time in the barn. So my parents would make me this, because they were calving or whatever, right? They would make me this, like, it was a bale stack, like small bale stack, and then they'd make me like essentially a playpen up there. And then kittens, there was always barn kittens, so I'd always have little,
oh my God,
like
yes.
a little kitten in my little red sweater, and the dogs were there, and you could kind of see everything. Anyways, there was a time where I got put, like, they'd also put me in the feeder if we were out in the cow pens. But we did we did have one cow that knocked me out of the feeder and like stomped me a little bit, but I don't remember that.
Oh my God.
But my parents, anyway.
You hear about it?
Yeah, I heard about it. And apparently they didn't do that again. They were like, oh, we almost lost a kid today, so we'll regroup. But so many good memories with that stuff. So, like, thinking about your kids and how you're trying to get anyways. I'm rambling, but so cool.
You know what? Just think about all that time you spent in the barn, all that good flora. You were just like building your immune system like you would not believe.
Well, it's good because it seemed like I was always on antibiotics as a kid. So.
Oh, maybe it was the can of Coke. But anyway.
Probably. Balance.
You got it figured out now. But yeah, no, I'm happy for my kids. And I feel also like during Corona, we've been really lucky to have this place where he can run around. And now our second one can crawl around.
Freedom.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for anybody that really is thinking about it, like me, you're at your desk job and you're just like looking at properties or watching YouTube shows and just like daydreaming about giant gardens and little lambs running around. Like, you just gotta do it. I can be super impulsive. I can also be a 5-year planner. Like, that's how I used to be when I had the desk job. But I just say, do it. I don't know. There's so much fun to have. And like, it is a lot of hard work. And I definitely would like probably make a list of 10 things that you should make sure you have before diving in, such as like fences, but whatever. It's fun. You just gotta go for it, because you could just spend so much time waiting. And I mean, life it flies by. And I mean, of course, you can still do it when you're 65. Like, you can do it anytime you want, but if you want to do it, you can do it. And then if you do it for 10 years and you decided you don't like it, great. Your property went up in value and then you sell it and get into something else. Like, it's just so, I don't know. I think it's something worth pursuing.
And if COVID's taught us anything, it's shown us what we don't like about our lives, right? How we kind of feel stuck in them, and that life is too short to not go get a milk cow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not go buy a homestead. Like, life is too short not to go do it if you're thinking about it. Like,
yeah. I mean, even having chickens in your backyard in the city, like, if they allow it, just do it. Chickens are so easy and so much fun. Like, but it's definitely, I think that going after that kind of thing is really rewarding, and it's a really great feeling.
That's awesome. So if people want to see, tell them your YouTube channel, where they can find you, and I will also put it in the show notes too.
Okay, so my YouTube channel is called Ferngully, which, yes, sounds a little bit cliche. Obviously, I'm a 90s kid. But when we saw this property, it's an inland. It's one of the only, our area is one of the only inland rainforests in the world. So ours is sort of, not technically, but somewhat semi-rainforest. And I was like, oh my God, this place looks like Ferngully. The name stuck. So my channel is Ferngully. And my Instagram is Ferngully XO. So if you want to watch my stories and see, the time my cow got into the chicken coop and ate all the chicken feed and I couldn't get her out, and all of the fun adventures, the barn cats, the livestock guard dog, the ducks and the geese. You can check me out there. I do have a blog, ferngully.ca, which maybe one day will be updated. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do more episodes.
Well, it was so good to talk to you, Andy. So thanks for this opportunity. And I'm just like so pumped about your podcast. And I learned so much from listening to your first episode. I couldn't even believe it. I just feel like this is such a great thing that you're doing for people out there. So please don't stop.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Okay.